Welcome to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast.
Without a crew, a ship is just a hunk of steel sitting in the harbor, right? It takes a crew to bring a ship to life. It takes people to bring our businesses to life, our plans to life, the things we're trying to do. A lot of times, people get promoted into management jobs and they sort of go back to what they were used to doing as an individual contributor. They do emails, they go to meetings, and they forget that it's about the mission and the people. Leadership is a people business. It's about people. So if you are doing and not leading, then you're really not doing your job as a leader.
That's Jon Rennie. He's a former U.S. Navy nuclear submarine officer who made 7 deployments during the end of the Cold War, and since then he's led 8 manufacturing businesses and authored 3 leadership books. I'm Pete Mikaitis. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job, and now here's Jon. Jon, welcome.
It's good to be here, Pete.
I am excited to have this conversation. I'd love for you to kick us off with a riveting tale from your days in a nuclear submarine during the Cold War. Bring us into the scene.
Well, can you imagine 155 guys getting on board a submarine, then locking the hatches for 100 days, where you deploy out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean for 100 days, and you're with the people that you deploy with. You have to get all these very difficult things done. We had 24 nuclear missiles, a nuclear reactor, and the average age was about 20 years old. And I did that 7 different times in my life. So it's kind of an interesting experience. It's certainly a great place to learn how to deal with people, how to get along with people.
Absolutely. And geez, Jon, do people ever just go nuts down there? Like, how does that work? How do we prevent for that? Because that seems like there's a reasonable probability that at least a couple of those folks would just mentally lose it. I don't know if I could handle it. Like, how do you train for that?
I don't know if they train for it, but they do screen. They do a lot of psychological evaluations. But here's how they really test you. On your first deployment, they actually have you climb inside of the torpedo tube all the way to the end with a grease pencil to write your name on the outer door of the torpedo tube. And then they shut the inner door while you're in there. And that's their test to see if you're claustrophobic.
Okay. Well, so you've got a couple books here in terms of sharing what business professionals can learn from sailors and their experience in submarines. Could you give us a cool example of a story of a principle that, you're right, you teach about it, and how it really came to life and transformed someone in their profession or in particular into a leader worth following?
Yeah. So one of the big things about being on a submarine is that there's a shared level of responsibility. So every sailor is critical to the operation of a submarine at sea, and no person is more important than another. So we have a shared responsibility to operate the submarine correctly, complete the mission, and get home safely. Now, it's the other side of it is we have a shared vulnerability. So if anything goes wrong, if your most junior sailor turns the wrong valve, everyone perishes. So there's not like one person dies, we all die. So there's a shared level of responsibility and vulnerability that is kind of unique to just about any other organization. And you can imagine when I came out of the military and went into the corporate environment, I didn't get that same feeling, right? There were certain people that had certain privileges and other people that had other privileges. And when things went bad, the people with the lower privileges are the ones that got laid off, right? So the manufacturing workers or the call center people, they're the ones that always got the brunt of whenever there were layoffs. But when I started running manufacturing businesses after I got out of the Navy, I took that philosophy of we're all in it together, and we need to have a shared level of responsibility and accountability to the business results. So in fact, my second book is called All in the Same Boat, because literally I learned leadership in a boat and, all of us together working towards a common objective.
Okay. And could you share with us a tale of a time where you shared these principles with folks and someone really latched on and incorporated it, made it their own, and put it into practice and saw some cool stuff happen?
Yeah, my first plant that I took over, I was young, 32 years old. I was the youngest plant manager in that plant in history. And I came there, I noticed that there was an us and them attitude in the manufacturing plant. So the hourly people kind of stuck to themselves. They had their own bathroom. They had their own areas where they congregated. And the salary people had their own areas too. And I kept thinking to myself, how do we become one team, right? We have like sort of 2 separate areas. We live 2 separate lives. We didn't have a lot of shared experiences. And I wanted to get back to those days. Like, for example, on a submarine, you stood long watches, 6 hours at a time with your coworkers, and you really got to know them. They understood what, your challenges, you understood their challenges. We just didn't have that in the corporate world in this manufacturing plant. So I implemented this process called Fridays on the floor, where the first Friday of every month, I went out on the shop floor for 4 hours and I worked. And every month I'd go to a different department and I'd work. And so I'd actually operate the equipment. I would get to know the people. They would get to know me. And I learned that there was a tremendous amount of information on the shop floor that most of the salaried, most of the manager, they weren't even aware of. So it was like there were two different worlds we lived in. We weren't one boat. We were two separate boats. And when I started doing that, I kept learning more and more about the way things operated and the concerns that people have, tooling that was bad, procedures that were bad, all these things that I learned when I was doing it. And when I would come back and talk to the other managers, they didn't understand my passion. They didn't understand what I was talking about. So over time, we actually created Fridays on the floor for all of our management team. So we all would go out every Friday. We'd rotate different areas. And then after those 4 hours, we'd come back into one of the meeting rooms and we would talk about what we learned. And what was interesting is that we basically started bridging that gap between the hourly and salary people on that site. And we started fixing all these problems that have been going on for years and years that have kind of been ignored. So just by doing that, by getting out on the shop floor, actually spending time with people, we actually built that bond, we built a connection, and we sort of built a common view of the businesses. And so we ended up in that business. I was there for almost 4 years, and we were able to just improve our processes, reduce our scrap. We ended up having record levels of sales, record levels of profitability, and a very high-performing operation. And we became sort of the top factory in our division. But it was all about connecting the people. Instead of having two worlds, we brought them together into one world. And this came straight from the ideas from the military.
That is good. Back in episode 149, we had a guest, Chris Edmonds, who said, people in the organization see stuff that's dumb all the time.
Yes. Yes.
We see stuff that's dumb. And then whether or not that gets shared or implemented upon is, I guess there's all kinds of variables that might speak to it in terms of what's the culture, what's the psychological safety of the organization. And what's fun about your approach there is we don't actually have to rely on someone speaking up to get the information. And hopefully, as you do that over some reps, we build some real trust and communication lines that go both ways so that people will just say, hey, our mallet's worn down. Like, oh, gotcha. Okay, well, boom, here's a new one. So you see these sorts of ongoing improvements in the communication, the culture, and the ability fix the stuff they see that's dumb all the more quickly and readily instead of waiting for years to get a fresh mallet.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing too is I think we built shared experiences. And that's one thing that we had on the submarine is we had all these shared experiences where I noticed when I got to the corporate world, they had different experiences about what work life was like. A lot of the people on the shop floor didn't even know what the people in the office did. They're like, I don't know. There's just a bunch of people over there. I don't know what they do. And so part of it was them getting to know what we did every day. And I think that was one of the eye-opening things about this Fridays on the floor is that the people were actually thankful. They were like, I never knew what you guys did all day long. I never knew what marketing did. I didn't know what accounting did. I just knew there was a bunch of people in the office. They got to sit. I had to stand all day. Really interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so I want to hear about, you got a few books. The title I love the most was I Have the Watch, Becoming a Leader Worth Following. A fantastic subtitle. Generally speaking, how does one become a leader worth following?
Well, it comes into the title, which is I Have the Watch. And part of I was a naval officer, and part of that, when you took over the watch, you were responsible for the mission and the people. So if I was the officer of the deck, for example, I was responsible for 6 hours for the mission of that submarine and everybody inside of it. So in the case of maybe the mid-watch, captain was asleep in his rack down in his stateroom, and I was responsible for that ship, everything that happened on that ship for those 6 hours. And so it's the idea of mission and people. And that's really critical because a lot of times people get promoted into management jobs and they sort of go back to what they were used to doing maybe as an individual contributor. They do emails, they go to meetings, and they forget that it's about the mission and the people. And so the idea of I Have the Watch is that you have responsibility. You take ownership of the mission, you take ownership of the people. And that's really critical part of leadership. And a big part of this book I talk about is that leadership is a people business. It's about people. So if you are doing and not leading, then you're really not doing your job as a leader, right? So your job is to lead. Your primary function is to lead. And it's different than when you're an individual contributor, like maybe an engineer or an accountant. When you become the manager, you have leadership responsibilities. And sometimes we forget about that. Oftentimes I saw it in corporate that people forgot their people responsibilities.
Could you share with us an example of a common people responsibility that people forget?
So the big thing I saw is busyness. So we stay busy as managers. And so we want, in a lot of cases, it's fear-based. So where managers really don't want to deal with people, and because people are messy, I always say that too, the people are messy, so they don't want to deal with it. So it's easier to be in my comfort zone and just answer emails or be on the phone all day or be in conference rooms all day than going out to the uncomfortable place where my people work and they may have complaints or they may have concerns. And maybe you're overloaded, maybe you get a lot of things on your plate and you don't want to spend that time getting out and talking to the people. And that's so you isolate yourself. And I see a lot of managers, my 22 years in corporate, I saw a lot of managers isolating themselves. And mostly it was fear-based. They just didn't want to take the time and listen to the challenges that their employees are having. And so I always challenge managers to get out, to go where your people are. It's an essential part of what we do is to get out of our offices and spend time to where our people are. So I have a manufacturing company that I run. And in the afternoons, I always push myself away from my desk and I go out and I pretty much can work any job on the shop floor. So I'll just jump on the line and help out the employees. And I'm not there to help. I don't really do a lot of helping. I'm there to listen. I'm there to talk and I'm there to communicate because that's really what's important. We have to be present as leaders.
Now, Jon, I'm wondering, so manufacturing is really cool because one, it's just fun to watch how stuff gets built and it's unfolding along the process. It's a beautiful thing to witness. If folks are in other industries that are a little bit less hands-on or tactile, how might we implement that with regard to that joining together on the front line and observing? I'm just sort of imagining. I'm thinking about my audio people like, all right, so how do I hop in on that? It's like, okay, you're many miles away from me and you're doing audio stuff and software, which I appreciate. I love it. How might I apply some of these Jon principles in these contexts?
Yeah, so we've seen a lot with remote and hybrid work these days. And the concept, by the way, is not something that I developed. It's called Gemba. It's part of the lean manufacturing principles that come from Toyota. And the principle of Gemba is to go where the value is added. So, and usually in the case of any type of business, where most of your people are, that's where the value is added. So you want to go to where your people are, right? So now the question is, what do you do with hybrid and remote work? Well, you have a normal check-in process. So you have a check-in process where, in this case, I would say probably more like once a week where you check in on individuals and you have a one-on-one and you say, how are things going? How are things going with this project? And you have that chance to be able to touch base. It's a little different than pushing yourself away from your desk and walking out to where your people are. So it's the idea of Genba, where the value's added, go where the value's added, and it's going to be different for every type of business.
All right. Thank you. I guess I'm also thinking about sort of screen sharing type stuff. Like, hey, here's what's up. Here's the software I use, etc. And I could just sort of behold, oh, what's going on there? Oh, wow, that's really cool. It's like, wow. And I think you could still learn some things like, wow, it seems like you're spending a lot of time dealing with this. It's like, yeah, man, we get the audio. It's a mess. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. I had no idea. Maybe I should be sending guest microphones. And we do. So, okay, cool. You've got a number of interesting turns of phrase, which I'd like to dig into a little bit. What do you mean when you suggest that we let people fail?
Yeah. Failure is a powerful teaching tool. We don't like to fail, right? So as humans, we don't want to fail. We want to succeed in everything we do. One of the things the Navy taught us was that was the best way to learn was to fail. And the way they did it was they put you in a position as junior officer of the watch. So you would have like an officer of the deck and you'd have a junior officer of the deck. And so when you were junior officer of the deck, you were under the supervision of a more senior watchstander. And so typically then you would take that junior position and they would throw all sorts of different casualties at you, flooding, fire, you name it, an incoming torpedo. And they wanted to see how you fought the ship as a junior watchstander. And inevitably, they would throw everything at you and you would fail because it was impossible. They threw too many things at you. And then they would stop the drill. We'd get the ship safe and they would start talking to you. What do you think you did right? What do you think you did wrong? It was the teaching session. It was a coaching session. And through that, we became better watchstanders because we failed, we learned, and we got better at each of these individual tasks. Now, what do we do in corporate a lot of times? And one of the things I noticed kind of coming into corporate is that we take our really difficult jobs and we give them to our senior people because we don't want any mistakes. We don't want failure. We take our junior people and we give them grunt work and we make them do grunt work until you've been around long enough to take on a more important task. And I think we miss out on opportunities to give younger people challenging assignments and a mentor to help them through that process so they get exposure to the difficult things in business instead of just doing grunt work. The problem when you give a junior employee grunt work for 2 years is that they get frustrated. They might come into your company very excited, very happy to be there with a lot of passion, and that goes away as they continue to just do stuff that it's beneath maybe their skill sets or beneath the things that they train for in college, or maybe they got a certification in something that they never get a chance to use. So I really do believe that we need to allow our employees to fail in a controlled manner if we want them to learn and develop and become better.
Can you give us some examples in practice of folks failing in a controlled manner, specifically in terms of what's a person's normal responsibilities versus new stretch responsibilities, and how is that controlled manner executed?
So in my case, I'm always looking for leadership potential in employees, like someone that can maybe step up to the next level. And so one of the things I like to do is to give them a stretch assignment. So this might be anything from develop a marketing literature for this new product that we're coming out, or give me a market study for this particular region for this product, or lead this effort to set up pricing for this new product. So I'll give them a stretch assignment, which is almost always outside their comfort zone. And then I want to get a chance to meet with them and assess how they do with that. So how did they do with a project that was outside their comfort zone? And you learn a lot from those sessions. So you get a lot of feedback. A lot of times the employee's excited. They get an opportunity to do something different. They're going to mess up. And it's a great chance for coaching. You find some employees aren't ready to step up, and they even say that, like, wow, that was way beyond what I want to do. I'm maybe not interested in that. And others are just energized by it. Can I do it again? This was fun. This was what I want to do in my career. So I think finding great employees and giving them stretch assignments is a great way to evaluate their skills and give them a chance to do something kind of exciting and different.
All right. So then with the marketing study, for example, I suppose if they give you a terrible study, nothing disastrous has happened there. It's just like, okay, if we're not going to use this information to make any decisions. But like nobody is died, injured, or millions of dollars have been destroyed. Like they just said, okay, you've produced a document that is of no value. So that is a failure, but it's controlled in the sense that no major damage has been done. Is that how you think about it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and again, the more you get a chance to see somebody in action, the more you're going to give them more responsibility that may have higher risk associated with it. But yeah, so you do it where failure is not going to be fatal.
Okay, so failure is not going to be fatal. And then you're sharing with them great feedback associated with, hey, yeah, thanks for taking a crack at this marketing study. Here are some ways you could make that useful for us, et cetera.
Yeah, and also too, it's the feedback of learning from them, like, how did it go? Where did you struggle? Where did you have a hard time finding information? How do you think you did on this? Just hearing their experience helps you understand how kind of their mindset going into it and coming out of it, and how you can help coach them to even be better.
All right. And do you have pro tips for how you do deliver that coaching?
I think it's kind of being honest. I think being honest is really important. I mean, obviously you got to be sensitive to people's feelings. I'm maybe a little more sensitive to that. I don't want to be too harsh, but I do think we need to give them the honest feedback. And I would tell you, I've had people where I've given them stretch assignments and they have failed. And when I say to them, really, this isn't really working out, and they know it's not working out there. Yeah, I recognize that. And it's probably not something I want to do more of. So I think both parties recognize when this is not a good fit.
Well, Jon, just for fun, I'd love to zoom in. Let's say I handed you a marketing study, which clearly appeared to be assembled in 45 minutes with Google and ChatGPT and had factual inaccuracies, but a couple cool looking charts. And so it's no good. How do you share that with me?
Yeah, I would ask the process. So how did you develop this? Where did it come from?
Oh, I did some research across the internet.
Yeah. Well, what kind of research?
I was looking to see different competitors and their potential revenue associated with these offerings.
Did you talk to anyone else as you went through the research? Did you talk to anyone in the marketing department or anybody in our sales department?
Oh, no, I didn't talk to anybody.
Okay. Why not?
It didn't occur to me.
So I think there's the discussion. There's the sort of finding out where they see the aha moments, like maybe I should have talked to more people.
Okay. And so I'm wondering, how do you also convey the standard or what good is?
Does it answer all the questions we're looking for? Typically with an assignment like this, we have things that we want to get out of it. And if they fall short, then we're going to have those discussions.
Okay. There you go. In terms of, okay, the study, to go into a little bit more detail, these are the particular questions we were looking to get answers for. And this deliverable does not presently answer those questions or has false answers to those questions.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. You also have the turn of a phrase, earn your oxygen. What does that mean and how do we apply it?
Yeah. So we had an expression on the submarine that was, how do I say it? It's a little controversial because there was a high level of positive peer pressure on a submarine. I mentioned earlier, every sailor we have to trust you with our lives, right? And so when you first come on a submarine, we call you a nub. A nub is a non-useful body, right? Until you could earn your oxygen, until you could be responsible for some area of the submarine, then you were a useful body. So you were taking the oxygen and the food from people that were useful. And so there was a high level of positive peer pressure to get qualified, to become a qualified operator. And so what qualification meant on a submarine was for the sailors, junior sailors, to work with more senior sailors to prove their competency in various operations, procedures, watch standing. And so as they proved their proficiency, they would actually have what's called a qualification card, a qual card. And they would get signatures that, okay, a senior watchstander says, this person understands how to use the torpedo launch system. This person knows how to repair a steam fitting. So you would get qualified over time and become qualified. So earning your oxygen means that everywhere you go, not even in the Navy, but in the civilian world, what are you doing to earn your oxygen? What are you doing to add value to the business that you work for, the organization that you work for? So I often talk to high school students, and that's one of the messages I say is don't be a nub. And so the concept there is that there's so many people in our world that are consumers and not creators. They're consumers and they're not builders. And so I really encourage high school students to not be a consumer, not spend your time online just entertaining yourself. What are you doing to build? What are you doing to grow? What are you doing to add value? So the idea of earning your oxygen is becoming valuable to your organization, whoever you work for, or whatever you're doing in the world.
I think that's important to consider. And I think about, in businessy terms, there's the value you consume associated with, there are costs associated with keeping you employed with a salary and benefits, equipment, office space, etc. And then there's value you hopefully are creating through your work. And so I guess if we talk about oxygen versus dollars, it's interesting that in some fields, it's very clear, like sales. It's like, okay, hey man, this is what you sold. This is what I'm paying you, or a fundraising. It's very clear. And then it gets a little fuzzier the farther away it gets from that, in terms of, it's like, oh, well, I am doing accounting or finance work. And so it's like, okay, well, that needs to be done. We have to stay compliant, but I mean, that's valuable. And so it's tricky to precisely assess that. And yet I think it's my belief, as we see, layoffs and such, that the more clear and massive the value you're contributing is, the safer your job and the more likely you're going to be on an upward trajectory there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say a lot of people will kind of come into a job and they say, well, this is your job responsibilities, and people will do the bare minimum. They would just do that job responsibility. I also say, look for the extras that you can add value to in the organization. So, I started out in corporate world as an associate design engineer in a cubicle. And 5 years later, I was running a manufacturing plant. Well, it didn't happen that I just magically got there. It was through earning my oxygen and adding value in everything that I did. And in my case, going from a cubicle to the corner office was all about volunteering, learning new skills, being there when the company needed me, and doing anything I could to support the organizational objectives. And that eventually got me the opportunity to lead a plant. But I think if you haven't put the extra work in, you say, well, I want to be promoted. I want to move up the corporate ladder, but I'm not willing to put the work in. You're not going to get there. It does take extra effort if you want to get noticed, if you want to achieve goals that you have in your career. I didn't necessarily have a goal to run a manufacturing plant at 32, but it happened because I was adding a lot of value in everything I did.
Well, and John, I'd love to hear the counterpoint to that in terms of if employees are doing that and have seen, the meritocratic forces do not seem to be operational here. My added value appears to amount to squat, and it feels like I'm just sort of burning the midnight oil for no extra compensation, and it feels like a raw deal. How do you speak to that perspective, and how do we assess whether extra efforts are likely to result in extra goodies?
Well, it doesn't always work out that way, does it? I mean, so I think, I have a good friend, John Brubaker, that always says, go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. And I think a lot of times that we are in positions or in organizations that don't recognize that kind of extra effort. You have bosses that don't care necessarily, or they're looking out for themselves and not looking out for their team. So there are times when you can do a lot of extra work and not get noticed. And maybe that's not the right organization that you should be in. But I think it's good to have a discussion with, you're always going to get those opportunities to have a one-on-one with your boss. And so, in a lot of companies, it's once a year during annual performance review, you get a chance to sit down with your boss. And at that point, you can have that discussion. Hey, I've been trying to do this. I've got this dream or this desire or this goal to get to this level. I've been doing a lot of extra work. What else could I be doing to try to earn or move into the position I'm looking to do? Have that frank conversation. But I would also say is be willing to move to find those opportunities.
Okay, thank you. Well, John, tell me anything else you want to make sure to mention before we shift gears and hear about some of your favorite things.
The one thing I would say this is, when it comes to like a similar analogy from the Navy to the businesses is that without a crew, a ship is just a hunk of steel sitting in the harbor, right? It takes a crew to bring a ship to life. It takes people to bring our businesses to life, our plans to life, the things we're trying to do. So I think people are very critical to our business, and without them, we're not going to go anywhere. So I think we sometimes overlook the importance of people in our organizations.
And big thanks to our sponsor, Acorns. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing for your future. You don't need a lot of money or expertise to invest with Acorns. In fact, you can get started with just your spare change. Acorns recommends an expert-built portfolio that fits you and your money goals, then automatically invests your money for you. NerdWallet.com, whom I love on these sorts of matters, gives Acorns a whopping 4.7 stars and says, quote, if you want to make the most of your spare change, there's no better place to do that than Acorns. Head to acorns.com/awesome or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. And we got a legal disclaimer here. It may not be representative of all clients. Tier 1 compensation provided. Compensation provides an incentive to positively promote Acorns. View important disclosures at acorns.com/awesome. Investing involves risk, including the loss of principal. Please consider your objectives, risk tolerance, and Acorns' fees before investing. Acorns Advisors LLC, Acorns, is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Brokerage services are provided to clients of Acorns by Acorns Securities LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. For more information, visit acorns.com. One sponsor to check out is Storyworth. Whenever I'm thinking about meaningful Father's Day gifts, Storyworth leaps to mind. Storyworth helps you preserve precious memories and stories from your father for years to come. Each week, Storyworth emails your loved ones a thought-provoking question that you get to help pick, such as, what's the bravest thing you've ever done? I personally love the prompt so much that I have refreshed Storyworth's questions page many times looking for more. Storyworth makes the writing process super quick and easy. All your loved one needs to do is respond to that email with a story, and then you get a quick copy of that. And after a year of this fun, Storyworth compiles your loved one's stories and photos into a beautiful keepsake hardcover book that you'll be able to share and revisit for generations to come. Families love Storyworth so much, they've got 25,000 five-star reviews on Trustpilot and have millions of stories preserved. So give all the fathers in your life a unique, heartfelt gift they'll all cherish for years. Storyworth. Right now, you can save $10 on your first purchase when you go to storyworth.com/awesome. That's storyworth.com/awesome to save $10 on your first purchase. One sponsor to check out is Harvard Business Review. This brilliant magazine, published at hbr.org, is the leading destination for smart management thinking. Fun fact, HBR has been mentioned in 108 episodes of the show. That's because HBR has great stuff that comes up often. They've got explainer videos, podcasts, real-world case studies, and much more. I think of HBR each night that I put on my special orange glasses. Their article, Will Blue Light Glasses Improve Your Sleep?, revealed that those who wore them reported better sleep and a 7% improvement in work performance as compared to those who wore the sham glasses. So I cite HBR anytime anyone tells me that I look silly wearing them. Now, much of HBR's content is available for free when you sign up at their site. Subscriptions that get you unlimited content cost $10 a month. If you visit hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME, you can save 10% off of that subscription. Again, to save 10% off of your HBR subscription, go to www.hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME. Okay. Well, now, Jon, could you share with us a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
Well, I like Teddy Roosevelt, just about anything he says, but the man in the arena quote has probably been best for me. So the idea of being in the arena is where I want to be, not a critic in the stands. And I always say, be a builder, not a critic. It's hard to be a builder. It's easy to be a critic.
All right. And could you hear a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
I've been doing a lot of work right now in my PhD program on perseverance and grit, and especially in small teams. How do you develop grit in a team? So Angela Duckworth did a lot of work on grit. I love her work. So yeah, perseverance has been something I've been into lately.
Okay. And a favorite book?
First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham. It's the one book that sort of changed my outlook for how leaders can lead.
And a favorite habit?
I get up at 4 a.m. every morning. So I write until 5 and I work out from 5 to 6. So I've been doing that for about 10 years. And so I feel like I can get a lot done in the early morning.
All right. And is there a key nugget you share that really seems to connect and resonate with folks? You hear them quote it back to you often?
The big one is leadership is a people business. I see that quite a lot.
All right. And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
My website, jonsrennie.com, and I'm on every social media at Jon S. Rennie. I'm pretty active on Twitter, so X, I guess now.
All right. And you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
Yeah, you want to be awesome at your job. Don't be a nub. Don't be a non-useful body. Be useful in everything you do.
All right, Jon, thank you and good luck.
Thank you, Pete.
I really appreciate Jon's perspective about getting really up close and personal in the details of the process of how the thing is done, whether it's on a manufacturing line or wherever, because all sorts of things bubble up in terms of improvement opportunities and mutual understanding and respect and camaraderie and commiseration and appreciation when that sort of perspective is highlighted. And the dumb stuff can get surfaced, eliminated, and all kinds of cool improvements unfolding. Good stuff from Jon. If you'd like a summary write-up of this conversation and all of our conversations, those are called the Gold Nuggets at awesomeatyourjob.com. They go right to your email, as well as open up the vault, the archive of the previous actionable summary write-ups, the Gold Nuggets at awesomeatyourjob.com. And if you want to view the particular transcript and show notes attached to this episode, you can find that at awesomeatyourjob.com/EP944. Hope you catch you next time, and peace.
Thanks for listening. To get the most out of the show, we recommend 2 key things. First, check out the extra resources at awesomeatyourjob.com. You can find this episode's transcript and links, as well as the perfect episode for your situation. You can search the full text transcripts of hundreds of episodes or explore episodes tagged by topic and competency covered. Second, subscribe to the podcast and get future episodes automatically. You can subscribe by telling Siri and several other smartphones and speakers, subscribe to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, or by tapping subscribe in your podcast player of choice. If you'd like some extra help figuring out podcasts and how subscriptions work, visit awesomeatyourjob.com/subscribe for guidance. Hope to catch you on the next episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job.